I think spaces outside of traditional theatres in the context of film are really important, because mostly the kind of films that you see in big theatres and the economics of films that those theatres support are only a certain kind of films. You can only make a certain kind of cinema if you want to cater to those spaces physically, geographically, and emotionally, and like from a curatorial point of view. So if you want to see different kinds of films, and if you want to see different, like the whole rainbow of films and visual medium that exists, then you need to have more spaces, and you need to have all kinds of spaces, big, small, very big, and then only will you be able to see the diversity of voices that exist in the world. You know, one of the reasons why I love films is because it's like a confluence of all the mediums and disciplines that I love, and that also are part of the entire curatorial of the festival. So there's dance, there's music, there's theatre, there's and film is sort of like, for me, like an umbrella, and it's not a it's like a little bit of a buffet, like where you are not really going in depth everywhere. But for me, it also includes things like physics and chemistry, and there's so much more going on in the medium of film, and hence it's now its own medium, and hence it really speaks to everything that is happening, same but differently. I think artists today are much more isolated than I feel, than whatever I've read, at least in history, mostly because we are so stuck in living out our everyday lives as commercial artists, and we're also, I think artists have started looking at themselves as entrepreneurs, which kind of they always were, but now much more so. And I feel like whenever I relate to the arts, I always look at or whenever I think of anything within the arts, I'm always drawn back to thinking about why do I make art. And whenever I think of that question, it always brings me back to the core of saying something, or being the medium through which something can be said or something can be made sense of. And when you start thinking like that, then you know, like, I don't think artists are really meant to be doing all the things we ask of them today, and hence they are much more isolated. They are meant to be just the truth sayers of society, and that's should be their only job, and it's the job of society to support them and to give them the resources to be able to just be the truth sayers and not do anything else, like sales and marketing. And I think because of this conundrum that we have landed ourselves in, artists are much more isolated in terms of being protectionists, in terms of being just closed in, and in terms of just not being able to find audiences that they can speak to in so many different ways. I feel a festival like Alti Palti supports these kind of artists, or all kinds of artists, by presenting a platform that is just slightly different, and it's just a different road that you can walk on. It's a possibility of a road, and it's a possibility of a new playground that can potentially exist, which has always existed in different small ways. A festival like Alti Palti really, you know, like can be a very flattened out space for artists to just exist and to just talk to each other and to vibe off each other and to do so many different things. At some basic level, I feel everything always needs some upside down turning in all artists' spaces and industries, because everyone thinks they can do it better and differently. In films, at least, things need a lot of, like, things always reach an inflection point, and then something needs to be done about it. And I feel, especially in the space of film, that inflection point is here, and I feel it's only going to be a very difficult 5, 6, 10 years for everybody who works in film, until we find more settled spaces that we can be like, okay, this is a, you know, like, this is a good vibe. We can make something and be sure that it will be shown somewhere and then keep going. focus on the making of it. But right now it's building time. I would expect Alti Palti to present artists which are surprising, and I think the premise of the festival, which says that it's surprising art in surprising spaces, is really like what one is trying to translate within the film space as well. So those are the kind of artists that you want to platform, and you want to bring out like obscure voices or voices that are normally existing in these small silos here and there, and put them in different stages. It's not going to be a discipline, but I feel the like pure sciences speak to me the way film does. Like if you talk about physics, or if you talk about chemistry, or if you talk about like basic human physiology, like those things speak to me much more in the way film does, because it feels like they are just worlds, and they are very complicated worlds which have a confluence of many different things that are occurring within them. And that's not to say that those other disciplines don't have that, but for me it's more of I relate film to more to pure sciences. I feel Bombay has always lacked the kind of art and films that I want to see, and it's not a question of like there's no audience, or it's not a question of that people don't want to see this kind of cinema or this kind of work. They all do want to. Whenever you show it, people do show up. But I feel Bombay is so much in run mode all the time that it forgets to reflect on itself. And I feel a festival like Alti Palti really like makes you just reflect for half a second on not constantly taking art and artists and mediums for granted. I think when you start looking at arts in that way, you start to also have the arts penetrate your life in so many different beautiful ways. And when you do that, like when this confluence sort of occurs for you as a citizen, as a person who lives within society, that's really powerful, and that's what I feel a festival like this can potentially do to the city and the cultural landscape of the city. Honestly, I'm just most excited about traversing the length of the city and going to just many different spaces. I've never done that, and it just sounds really exciting. I'm always attracted to small spaces because it creates for so much more of an intimate circle, a much more intimate vibe, and I feel like a huge part of what so-called alternative cinema is like is the kind of space that it is seen in, and those kind of spaces, like the film transforms when you shift it from space to space. When you are watching films, or when you're watching any actually kind of performative or any kind of piece, I feel it's always made for a certain spatialness. A large film deserves a large single screen cinema, and it should have space for a dance to happen in different spaces. It should have a fantastic lobby which gives you a happy feeling, and you walk in and you feel like you've entered a celebration of sorts. That's not the case for a melancholic indie film that wants to take you down, tell you the story of a house, for example. You don't want to see it in a large space. You could want to, but you want to. Ideally, my view would be that if I am a filmmaker and if I made this kind of a film, I would want to perhaps show it in a house, maybe, and the filmic experience is incomplete without showing it to a bunch of people, without having a collective sort of sigh in the room, without having a collective laugh in the room, without having a collective where you are feeling the same things as other people, which is where the collective emotionality of things sort of really grows within the room. Like it's like creepers, it goes everywhere in the room, and it takes over the room in some way. And that comes from the humans. They're all connected to these creepers as they grow, and And when you are seeing a film like this, you don't want more than 20, 30 people to be around. You want not 200 people. You don't want 3, 4 people. So I feel every film or every kind of like bucket of film has its own kind of spatialness that it best works in. It's almost like a dish, you know, like some dishes you cook in small pots, some dishes you cook in huge pots, some are on wood fire, some are on coal fire. So you need to be able to make that distinction between how to cook your dish, how to serve it, what kind of table size is the correct table size for good conversations and a good vibe and a memorable conversation, and then you can all you know, like go home. It's going to be spectacular. The larger curatorial that we're going with, I think, is speaking to a lot of movements that have happened within film history, movements that have happened in opposition to the zeitgeist, to the current like pop culture movement that is going on. And I feel like cinema is so political and it's so charged that it needs people to come around it and be like, we are not happy with a certain kind of things that are happening, and we need to together come together and be like, we want to do this now. And which is why collectives in cinema exist, and I'm hoping we are able to, at its peak, it should result in a collective movement of sorts. If you're coming to this festival, you should come with an open heart, an open mind, be willing to sit on floors, Alti Palti, and lie down and experience things like you've never experienced before, and just be part of this collective that's going to build out of this festival.